Good afternoon to our listeners on Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, our viewers on the Parliament channel, and those of you joining us on the World Wide Web via the Parliament's website www.ttparliament.org or via our YouTube channel ParlView. Today you can also join us. We are streaming live on Facebook as well. Just go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/ttparliament. On the agenda today, there is one paper to be laid in the name of the Prime Minister, one report to be presented, two urgent questions to be answered, and debate is expected to continue on the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2016. This bill was preserved from the first session of the 11th Parliament, and in this second session, on the 23rd of September 2016, the Minister of Finance moved the second reading of the bill, and contributing thus far are the member for Chaguanas West, Mr. Ganga Singh, and the Attorney General and member for San Fernando West, the Honorable Faris Al-Rawi. So we expect that debate will continue on this bill when the House resumes in just about 20 seconds' time. So we invite you to stay with us here on the Parliament channel as we bring you live coverage of today's sitting of the House of Representatives. We welcome you to the 12th sitting of the House in the second session of the 11th Parliament that takes place on Friday, December 9th, 2016.
We give thanks to you, the Creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this House here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen. Amen. Namaste.
Oath or affirmation. Announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, Mr. Rushton Pare, member for Miaru, and Mr. Prakash Ramada, member for St. Augustine, have requested leave of absence from today's sitting of the House. Dr. Nayan Gadsby-Dolly, member for St. Anne's East, has requested leave of absence from sittings of the House during the period Dr. Nayan Gadsby-Dolly, member for St. Anne's East, has requested leave of absence from sittings of the House during the period December 9th to 16, 2016. Mr. Barry Padarath, member for Prince's Tongue, has requested leave of absence from sittings of the House during the period December 9th to 18, 2016. The leave which the members seek is granted.
Bills brought from the Senate. Petitions. Papers.
The Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the Prime Minister, I have the honor to lay on the table the following paper. The breakdown of expenses to the Commission of Inquiry into the failure of CL Financial Limited, Colonial Life Insurance Company Trinidad Limited, Clico Investment Bank Limited, British American Insurance Company Trinidad Limited, Caribbean Money Market Brokers Limited, and the Hindu Credit Union Cooperative Society Limited. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Reports from committees.
Member for Diego Martin, Northeast.
Madam Speaker, I wish to present the following report. The first report of the Joint Select Committee on Energy Affairs on the strategies and incentives to promote new production in the energy industry, with a specific focus on the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries.
Prime Minister's questions, urgent questions.
Member for Tabaquit.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the Minister of Works and Transport, in the absence of the member for Tabaquit, in light of the 6.2 magnitude earthquake that occurred on Tuesday, December 6, 2016, and felt in both Trinidad and Tobago, could the Minister state whether the Ministry has conducted any structural review of the overpasses and major bridges across the country, and if so, when and by whom?
The Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to inform this Honourable House that the Ministry of Works and Transport, subsequent to the 6.1 earthquake which struck Trinidad and Tobago on the 6th of December 2016, the Ministry has been seeking to ensure that there are no structural damage to our infrastructure under its purview. This has been pursued via the continuous monitoring of our social media infrastructure to identify any report of damage which require immediate emergency attention. In addition, the Ministry is seeking to utilize its district system to have relevant engineers undertake site visits to all overpass and major bridges to ensure their structural integrity. This is an ongoing process on the part of the Highway Division of the Ministry. It should be noted that most of our overpass and major bridges were designed to highest AASHTO standards, which seeks to ensure that they can withstand earthquake to the magnitude experienced and higher. An example of this is the interchange at the Uriah Butler Highway, which was designed to withstand magnitudes of 7.2. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Supplemental question. Minister indicated that you have your technical people trolling the social media and therefore receiving reports.
No,
And my question is simply, have you received any report as to any structural damage done to the Children's Hospital in Couva?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, that matter must be under review at this time.
Did not ask about us.
Yes, the report. It has to be under review.
Member for Caroni East.
Madam Speaker, to the Honourable Minister of Health, could the Minister please indicate the number of babies diagnosed?
Members.
The number of babies diagnosed to date with microcephaly and the new measures, if any, that have been put in place for the prevention. Madam Speaker, the word is early detection rather than detention, and management. For its prevention, early detection, and management.
Minister.
I can only answer the question as posed to me, not with corrections now. Microcephaly is a birth defect where a baby's head circumference is smaller than expected when compared to babies of the same sex and age. Babies with microcephaly often have smaller brains that might not have developed properly. The causes of microcephaly are many and varied. 1, congenital, due to random genetic abnormalities. 2, fetal alcohol syndrome. 3, intrauterine infections, example due to German measles and Zika. 5, decreased oxygen to the fetal brain. And 6, severe malnutrition. In Trinidad and Tobago, it is estimated that every year we have about 10 to 12 babies born with microcephaly due to all these factors above. The measures can only be taken for intrauterine causes and are preventative. For example, through the excellent National Immunization Program, we can immunize against German measles. In the case of Zika, there is no WHO-approved vaccine as yet. What are we doing? We have launched a public awareness campaign when this government took the step to declare Zika a national public health emergency, which was condemned by the UNC then. We have distributed to date over 16,000 bed nets to pregnant women. We have insect vector management, including targeting spraying. As far as detection is concerned, most cases of Zika are asymptomatic, because I think the question is about Zika, although it did not mention Zika, but I will assist you. It's a poorly phrased question. Most cases for Zika are asymptomatic. The symptomatic cases are very mild.
Please don't disturb the proceedings of the House. Continue, please, Minister of Health.
And the clinical features of Zika are similar to other viral infections. Early detections. We have had early detection protocols in Trinidad and Tobago during pregnancy for all mothers in the first trimester. With Zika, that has been ramped up using WHO and CDC protocols together with our own local experts. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Caroni East.
Honourable Minister, do the new measures that you have indicated include epidemiologic surveillance of the 294 pregnant Zika-infected patients as of the 12th of September this year? 294 Zika-infected pregnant patients as of 12th of September this year, which would be more by this time.
Again, the honourable member is once again mistaken. The figure is not 294, it is 450 plus, and I have said so publicly. And yes, we have instituted measures to track all of these women nationally.
Member for Caroni East.
Could you give the nation and through us in Parliament what measures you have taken to track and the surveillance measures, particularly for these unfortunate infected pregnant patients with Zika?
Back in February of this year, we established an ad hoc committee to do the tracking. That has since evolved to a formal committee tracking all 450 plus mothers who are infected with Zika. And all of them have been screened, all of them have been scanned, and where anything untoward has been detected, they have been provided with the necessary counseling. We have gone to their homes and their surroundings and done insect vector management. So the process is robust. But again, I want to appeal to the population, unless you clean up your surroundings, that is the missing link in this whole thing. People need to take some personal responsibility and clean their surroundings.
Member for Caroni East.
Honourable Minister, we're trying to get the answer from you on how many...
I believe you've already asked your two supplemental questions.
Okay, fine.
Questions or notice? Request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance.
Member for Superior.
Much, Madam. I hereby seek your leave to move the adjournment of the House today under Standing Order 17 for the purpose of discussing a definite matter of urgent public importance, namely the failure of government to address the unprecedented increase in the number of murders and missing persons in Trinidad and Tobago. The matter is definite because it pertains specifically to the failure of the government to address the rapid escalation and increase in the number of murders and missing persons in Trinidad and Tobago. The matter is urgent because with each day murders are being committed with impunity in a manner and at a rate never before experienced in our country. With each day more persons are being reported missing and bodies that cannot be identified are being found. Each day families are reporting that their loved ones are either missing or cannot be found. It is urgent because if this situation continues unaddressed, it sends a signal to the criminal element that their crimes will go unpunished and they can continue their onslaught on the lives of our innocent citizens. Should this matter not be addressed urgently, more lives will be lost on a daily basis. The matter is of public importance because the increasing number of murders is engendering widespread fear and distress in our country. and is also damaging the international reputation of Trinidad and Tobago. It is of public importance because with each passing day, mothers and fathers are losing sons and daughters. Husbands are losing wives. Wives are losing husbands. Our children are becoming parentless with each murder committed and with each person that goes missing and unfound. We are losing our citizens each day, and there could be no more important matter than protecting the lives of our citizens. I so move, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Honorable members, I am not satisfied that this matter qualifies. Honorable members, I am not satisfied that this matter qualifies under this standing order. I advise that the member pursue this matter under standing order 16. Members,
Speaker, Madam
member,
Speaker,
I have not
today-
granted.
today
Member
you
for
may not-
Siparia. Member for Siparia. By virtue of standing order 55, I ask you to withdraw from the chamber. Member for Naparima also.
I will withdraw.
Members? Members on this side. Member for Carinese, could you kindly leave in silence? Thank you very much.
Statements by ministers, personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister, public business, government business, bills, second reading.
Honorable members, the debate on the second reading of the following bill, which was in progress when the House adjourned on Friday, September 23, 2016, will be resumed. A bill entitled, An Act to Repeal the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Act and replaced it with a new Tax Information Exchange Agreements Act, which would make provision for the implementation of agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and other states, providing for the exchange of information for the purposes of taxation, to validate the sharing of personal information held by the Board of Inland Revenue or financial institutions and for related purposes. Member for San Fernando West, you have 10 minutes left.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as the cameras are focused entirely on me right now, there will not be a pan view of the empty chamber opposite us. And it is therefore imperative to put on record the following statements. When last we were here, on September 14th, 2016, the opposition, September 23rd, 2016, the opposition saw the leader of their team, the member for Siparia, stand up, make an objection on the floor without a standing order, defy the Speaker's acknowledgements that there's a proper process in this House, and then the entire opposition bench walked out on the debate of the FATCA legislation. Today, Madam Speaker, yet again, the member for Siparia stood without standing order on a standard motion which Speaker Mark on several occasions in the 10th Republican Parliament ruled on similarly. A well-experienced leader of the opposition led a walkout of every single member of the opposition today again on the FATCA bill. Yeah. Madam Speaker, this must be put because Trinidad and Tobago, the banking community, the international community, the government of the United States of America, the entire 106 plus entities inside of the global forum, which is the European Union and other countries, are looking at this debate today. Against this walkout, the further factor to be put on the record is that the sole indication of the opposition's position on the mere 30 clauses for debate yet again in this Parliament has been by way of a press release dated Friday, 23rd September 2016. On that day, spending the Parliament's money and not the opposition's money, the leader of the opposition put out a press statement complaining about 6 clauses only. Clause 5, Clause 6, Clause 7, Clause 8, Clause 21, and Clause 25. Those 6 clauses were addressed by way of direct statements by the government, and those 6 clauses resulted in there being no longer any dispute whatsoever in relation to Clause 5, Clause 6, Clause 7, Clause 8, and Clause 25. There stands on the table one clause only signalled by the opposition, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That is Clause 21, which can be dealt with in a simple measure of committee stage. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is incumbent, having witnessed position today to debate a bill with no opposition at all, to again place on the record the opposition is debating a 3/5 majority bill. It is a special majority. We have 23 votes only. We require 26 votes to pass this bill, and therefore at least 3 members of the opposition would have been required to support this bill. There is no one sitting on the opposition bench to even address the people of Trinidad and Tobago on one occasion at least as to what the concerns of the opposition include. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I met with the Banking Association last week. Every single representative member of the Banking Association came to a meeting at the Attorney General's chambers. We went through the system of FATCA and what the issues are. And the Bankers Association said to me that they have made repeated attempts to reach out to the opposition, to ask them to engage the Bankers Association on the issues which they have concerns over on this bill. And I am very disappointed to say that as of this morning, when I spoke to the president of the Bankers Association, the managing director for Scotiabank, Mrs. Anya Schnur, that she confirmed for me today that notwithstanding repeated attempts to meet with the opposition, they have not even had the courtesy of a reply from the opposition. Therefore, the figures in Trinidad and Tobago are as follows, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The opposition has now walked out on the FATCA debate twice. The opposition has had September, October, November, December, since debating this bill on the second occasion, to submit to the government their indication of concerns on the bill. 4 months have passed. They have not even condescended to put a scrap of writing to the government. The government has, in an attempt to figure out what they're saying by virtue of the statement published on the 23rd of September, we have made amendments which we circulated in writing to the opposition since the 23rd of September, taking 5 out of 6 of their concerns entirely off the table, leaving one concern only, and the opposition has walked out again. Mr. Deputy Speaker, what is worse is that the Minister of Finance has been at pains to inform the country of the government's position in relation to FATCA. The Minister of Finance took the step to write to the United States government to obtain an extension of time for the passage of the FATCA bill. That extension was granted, Mr. Deputy Speaker, by the United States government. The United States government specifically extended the deadline to no later than February 2017, as was confirmed by them on September 30th, 2016. We are in the month of December right now. The FATCA bill has to be passed and the opposition has walked out again. This time, not on any measure to deal with the bill, but on a standard motion on the adjournment request. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm compelled as well to put forward not only the urgency of 30% withholding taxes coming to bite us in Trinidad and Tobago, because if this legislation is not passed, by both houses of Parliament, the effect is going to be the shutdown of the banking industry in Trinidad and Tobago, the application, if it is not entirely shut down, of a 30% withholding tax, the de-risking or debanking, as has happened in Jamaica, Belize, Haiti, Guyana, to name a few jurisdictions, which will result, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago having no way to deal with their corresponding banking, to pay for their foreign reserve allocation in foreign jurisdictions, to buy, as the manufacturing sector requires, goods and services, to deal with the entire provisions of the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is a further grave jeopardy to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and that concerns the Global Forum of Trinidad and Tobago, the Global Forum's view on Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me amp up the urgency of FATCA and this bill in the context of Global Forum. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago, under the UNC-led, Siparia-led UNC government, on the 4th of October 2011, engaged in the entry and admission into the Global Forum. The Global Forum, Mr. Deputy Speaker, involves 99 countries speaking as one voice, 99 jurisdictions out of a total of 116 jurisdictions, having to be rated immediately as either compliant or not compliant. The Global Forum requires us to engage all of our European partners, exactly as we are doing with the Americas in FATCA, that we must do the same thing for the OECD. 2011 we joined. There was a 2-limb process which required the Global Forum to rate our technical compliance and look at our efficiency. The Global Forum came forward.
Honourable Member, your speaking time has expired. You have an additional 15. You care to avail yourself?
Yes, please.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The Global Forum came forward, told the international community, and told Trinidad and Tobago, told Kamla Prasad-Bisesa, the member for Siparia, that we had to be urgently compliant within a 2-year period. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this bill, as it is currently drafted, allows for the Global Forum to become operationalized as the one limb only, that is the exchange of tax information, and therefore the Global Forum is an important core concept of this bill, not only the US factor. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am ashamed to tell you that the Global Forum has publicly stated in its chairman's statement of the 4th of November, that's just last month, 2016, that Trinidad and Tobago is non-compliant. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information for Tax Purposes, statement of outcomes for their meeting held in Tbilisi, Georgia, between the 2nd of November to the 4th of November 2016, I want to tell the nation what the UNC government left us in. Guatemala, the Federated States of Micronesia, and Trinidad and Tobago, 3 countries in the whole world, find themselves non-compliant. 3 countries in the whole world. What is worse, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that cabinet minutes of 2011 and 2013 under Siparia-led UNC government were specifically informed by way of cabinet note and cabinet minute that the consequence of non-compliance with the factor version for Global Forum was that Trinidad and Tobago would suffer negative consequences by way of delisting, debanking, and de-risking the loss of our banking services with Europe effectively if we did not act with urgency. I am ashamed to say that not only do we face the jeopardy of the positions to deal with FATCA today, but the UNC government has specifically, when they were in charge under the last administration, left us in a deeper, darker, more dangerous hole on the global forum outcomes, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Trinidad and Tobago, one of 3 countries only as members of Global Forum who are in non-compliant status. Mr. Deputy Speaker, what this says for Trinidad and Tobago is that the United National Congress, the Siparia-led United National Congress as the opposition of Trinidad and Tobago, has engaged in a complete and total dereliction of duty for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, as they have walked out on the Parliament twice now without explanation. They have failed to give one scrap of information in respect of what the country can expect on the bill that is now before us. And, Mr. Deputy Speaker, more importantly, they have left us in the lurch of the Global Forum jeopardy, which is, if I could put it this way, because it involves many more countries than just the United States of America, it's about 99% worse than FATCA. We have not had a single bit of information coming from the opposition. We have not had a single amount of work done. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to again state to Trinidad and Tobago that we cannot, under any circumstances, pass this bill on our own. We are obliged to receive the opposition's support. The proposal that the government engaged in the deafening silence by the opposition, was to debate this bill today, till whatever time it took for the bill to be concluded. Stay here, blankets and all. Finish the bill. And the opposition said to the country that they didn't want to meet behind closed doors. So we specifically came here today to go to a committee of the whole of this Parliament so that we could go through the 30 clauses in this bill before the entire nation, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We know that the opposition put out in written form concerns over 6 clauses only. We have already told the nation, by virtue of circulated amendments, that 5 of those 6 amendments are now gone. Concerns over those amendments are gone. We have 1 clause alone left for consideration. And that 1 clause, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is in relation to Clause 21. Clause 21 said that the competent authority shall either enter into an MOU with the Secretary of State of the United States Treasury, A, for the establishment of procedures, automatic exchange, B, to set out rules and procedures, etc., C, for the establishment as necessary for procedures. And the opposition's statement in their Friday 23rd advertisement 2016 appearing said the opposition had concerns about the reach of the MOU and the fact that it can affect the manner in which participants in the financial system were to be consulted, and the MOU should be subject to affirmative resolution of Parliament to allow for disclosure and debate. The opposition, for the record, said those things by way of press release are not on the floor. We say in answer to that, that this is a clear matter of policy, that we do not support the requirement for affirmative resolution. An MOU is not a legally binding instrument. It is not a statutory instrument. It is not a statutory document as defined in Section 75 of the Interpretation Act. And therefore, in those circumstances, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is no fetter in law. So that Clause 21 was easy to be dealt with. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago now has to call upon the opposition for an explanation. The Banking Association has to come out and ask the opposition why they would not meet with them on the umpteen calls, nor why they will not now meet in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, in a committee of the whole Parliament to deal with this. You see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I genuinely believe that it is the opposition's morbid fear of the reciprocity of information which the United States of America and Europe and Asia will give to us in automatic exchange of information, which will show where money which has been stolen under the last government is parked, that they are afraid of engaging. I am genuinely and heartfelt in the belief that it is that morbid fear of the opposition members to allow other jurisdictions to exchange information with this government, which will show us where the money is parked, which will fit into the agenda which we have of following the money and driving crime down into Trinidad and Tobago's memory never to be heard of, because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, unless you take away the profitability of crime, we are going to get nowhere. This opposition is running from that disclosure, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and there is not a soul opposite to contradict me otherwise. And that is why I make that statement as boldly as I do. That is why they are on record, and Orapooch East in particular is on record as standing against Explain Your Wealth legislation. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I ask the people of Trinidad and Tobago to see this for what it is. Why is the UNC hiding from this debate? Why have they abandoned the people of Trinidad and Tobago? Why do they not want reciprocity of information to flow? Because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we do not have a choice in the matter. The request to validate the exchange of information which the Board of Inland Revenue did with the United States government in the period 1989 to 2016 under a UNC government as well is a requirement of law. The request for us to ask for reciprocity as an automatic or spontaneous thing is a requirement of the Global Forum, 106 jurisdictions, the United States of America, and there's no choice in the matter. The choice in the matter is this: shut down your banking system, lose your banking business, drive Trinidad and Tobago's economy to the ground, or pass the legislation. We don't stand alone in this, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That's why we came acknowledging the requirements to be accepted from the Data Protection Act, acknowledging the requirements to be accepted from secrecy provisions under the Income Tax Act, acknowledging the requirements to be accepted from Section 4 right to private or privacy, if you want to put it that way. We asked for this in the Parliament because it's a requirement for business to continue. But how does Trinidad and Tobago explain what the opposition does today? I am genuinely upset that the people of Trinidad and Tobago should be subjected to this. I am mortified that the Siparia-led UNC government opposition could have walked out on the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I call upon every right-thinking citizen and the Media Corps and the Bankers Association to openly condemn the opposition for the dereliction of duty.
Chamber of Commerce.
I call upon the Chamber of Commerce, the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association, the Energy Chamber. I call upon the Chaguanas, Pinal, Couva, San Fernando, Port of Spain entities to condemn Trinidad and Tobago's opposition. I call upon our international partners to see them for what they are. Our Constitution requires a 3/5 majority to have the exceptions in law I've just laid out. This is what our country has purchased. This is the gift to Trinidad and Tobago for the Christmas period. This is why the opposition was so jumpy to watch the success that Dr. Rowley, as Prime Minister of this country, led in securing a landmark deal with Venezuela, where our economy and the vagaries of our economy could have been shored up by having gas supply to meet the Point Lisa's demand. The last Minister of Energy, Kevin Ramarine, lied to this country under Siparia consistently for years, saying that there was an energy issue caused by gas shortfall because of maintenance. Lie it was, I say. There was no shortfall, there was an undersupply, and the entire industry knew it, putting point leases at risk. And all of a sudden, instead of the population having the opposition say, well done, you did what we could never do, because we were misguided in focusing on Laura and Manatee as opposed to Dragon, which is so much closer and more feasible, they instead come to ask whether the agreement is valid or not. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish your indulgence to compliment the Honorable Prime Minister on shoring up Trinidad and Tobago's economy so that we can have confidence for business to flourish. With that Dragon deal secured, what is the next attack by the opposition to the economy? Walkout on factor. Watching a shutdown of this country's banking sector, an inevitable, inexorable, inescapable shutdown, they walk out on factor for the second time.
Honourable Member, you have 2 more minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am sure that my anger is evident. I express that anger on behalf of the people of San Fernando West and all of Trinidad and Tobago. I express that anger on behalf of the people in Siparia, Pointe-a-Pitre, Naparima, Tabaquite, Chaguanas, Caroni Central, and every desk opposite empty because they have no voice in the parliament. Those people, for the members opposite, have no voice in the parliament with no excuse, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think I've said it all. I wish I didn't have to say it. We came to complete the work today in a committee of the whole of the parliament with one clause only on the table left to deal with. One clause out of the 6 concerns that they raised. And I want to thank the staff of the Ministry of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Finance for working overnight and up to 5 minutes ago to plow through amendments which we could only guess would come up, to have option A, option B, and option C available just in case the members raised any concerns. I thank you for the opportunity to contribute, and I cry shame on the opposition.
Member for Laventille West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for recognizing me as I make my contribution to this very, very important debate at this very historic time in the circumstances of Trinidad and Tobago. As I do so, I ask that the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in the sight of the Almighty God as I speak them. I ask as well His blessings upon Trinidad and Tobago and express deep condolences on behalf of the government, my colleagues on this side, all of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, all of the people of the political organization that I support and have been a part of, to extend our condolences to the family, the mother in particular of young Shannon Banfield, who lost her life in yet inexplicable circumstances. We commiserate with the family. We share their pain. I am aware, because I had a conversation with the mother last evening, and I'm aware that the Prime Minister of this country expressed such sentiments as well, and we continue the work in the interest of Trinidad and Tobago. The objective of this legislation, this bill that is before us, the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill, which we called FATCA, and the signing of the Model 1 Intergovernmental Agreement was the UNC in government, Mr. Deputy Speaker, negotiated and signed that agreement on behalf of the government and the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We came to government, we met that in place, and as a responsible government, we accept that as a commitment on behalf of the people, and we are pursuing the rudiments, the implementation of the FATCA law into our domestic legislation to ensure that we give effect to the provisions of that IGA or Intergovernmental Agreement. It has to do with, as an objective, FATCA is to reduce the tax evasion by U.S. persons or citizens with respect to income from financial assets held in accounts that are held outside of the United States. So on the face of it, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is about economics, it's about money, but of course, it has far deeper and wider implications. The IGA is a tool for facilitating the implementation of FATCA legislation. The aim of the agreement was to assist the global effort against tax evasion and provide crucial clarity for financial institutions as they prepare to comply with the provisions of FATCA. The IGA model, one, seeks to implement an effective infrastructure for the exchange of information between the revenue departments of respective jurisdictions for the benefit of each other. As I said, the UNC and government negotiated and signed on to that. But alas, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are here today on this Friday, the 9th of December, in the year of our Lord 2016, and we witness the very sickening sight of the political and constitutional opposition walking out of this chamber yet again on this matter, FATCA, when it came before this House. I share and support the angst and anger of the Attorney General, because in particular as Attorney General, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as the drafter of this legislation, he wants to see this implemented for the benefit of the people. But today the UNC staged another walkout on the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I noticed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that before Madam Speaker was through dealing with the member for Siparia, my colleagues on the other side had already begun to pack their bags. So it is clear to us on this side that it was a manufactured walkout. They came with a premeditation. They came planned to do it. Yes. Mr. Deputy Speaker. And they did what they came set to do. Premeditated. The member for Siparia got up here and moved a motion wanting to adjourn the business of this House to discuss murders. There was a time when the law of murder required premeditation. If it was that, they would have been all found guilty. They came with a plan. And I have to wonder aloud, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I'm asking the question in all sincerity before man and before God, is it that they have something to hide? Is it that they have a problem passing this legislation? I remember Clause 34, when I stood up in the Senate and described it as ad hominem legislation, because ad hominem is a concept recognized in constitutional law where you make law and you are not supposed to do that for the benefit of one individual or one group or one concern. That's not how law is supposed to be made. And I realized in that debate and formed the opinion that their position on Clause 34 was ad hominem. It was to benefit a specific group or individuals favorable to the UNC. And today I ask myself again, whether this walkout is not ad hominem in that sense. Is it that they have no time for their constituents? They have no time for the citizens of this country. They have no time for the economy. It is all about, is it, Mr. Deputy Speaker, protecting things that might have been stashed in other parts of the world that this legislation and the global arrangements that it is designed to bring would unearth? You will recall, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that with the airport inquiry, the then Prime Minister Patrick Manning, may his soul rest in peace, told this country that it was not the security elements and the revenue department in this country that detected the airport racket, you know. It was the United States money laundering apparatus saw large sums of money moving out of Trinidad and going elsewhere. And it was the United States who alerted the government of Trinidad and Tobago, thinking first that it had to do with drug dealings. And when they discovered that it wasn't about drugs only, they left it alone until they shared it with the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The Prime Minister then got his Attorney General, Glenda Morian, to take possession of certain documents from the United States and to establish a commission of inquiry led by a former Chief Justice called Clinton Bernard. And at the end of that inquiry, recommendations were made for criminal prosecution against certain persons. All of that happening while the UNC was in government, when they were supposed to spend $400 million on the creation of a new airport terminal and ended up spending $1.6 billion. And as my friend is reminding me, in that case, inexplicably, one door was invoiced for $250,000. And a table $275,000. But we now know where the money went and how it went. This thing is very serious. Today we see the same UNC with the same member for Siparia, who was an attorney general at that time, walking out on legislation that could only do good for us. This is a serious situation, and we call on the people of Trinidad and Tobago to take close note. Is it that they have cocoa in the sun? Is it that they have money stashed away in this world that they are afraid that this would unearth? I have my own feelings on the matter. I'll express them later. But the legislation in front of us, Mr. Speaker, as has been clearly adumbrated by my friend, the Honorable Attorney General, has its origins in the United States when in 2010, or in fact in 2009, a major Swiss bank, UBS, an offshore banking scandal developed. And it was discovered that there were many individuals and corporations stashing large sums of money in that institution. Taxation is important everywhere and in all of human history, parliamentary democracies. In fact, a fundamental principle from the mother of all democracies, England, is that there should be no taxation without representation. It is the reason why, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we have a budget debate here dealing with taxation, fiscal issues, we debate it in the Senate, but there is no vote there because those are not elected persons. It is the House of Representatives, where elected people deal with taxation issues. Taxation is extremely important because without taxes, a government cannot provide national security, it cannot provide education, it cannot provide for health, and it cannot provide for the social platform that some elements of the citizenry depends upon. So the government collects taxes and uses these taxes to provide public goods and public services for the benefit of us all. From electricity to water to public transport, you name it. Tax is important. And therefore the United States is an example of a country that treats tax business very seriously. Every citizen in the United States understands the value, the significance of the IRS. And the jeopardy that failing to comply with their orders and their laws would bring. Many citizens have gone to jail. In the last presidential elections, issues arose around the presidential candidate, Donald Trump. Tax is a big, big issue. So when they realized that some of their citizens would have been stashing away money in the Swiss bank, they put legislation in place in 2010 to deal with that because America, you got to pay Uncle Sam's tax dollar. Got to do that. But then as I told you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, while it might appear to be purely economic and about money, it has deeper implications because it is that hidden money that could be used to do dangerous things, including financing terrorism. and the whole money laundering issue, an example of which I gave you a while ago with the airport scandal in Trinidad and Tobago. So the purpose of this legislation is to combat tax evasion by facilitating a shared, robust platform with the United States. It is an international agreement. This IGA, several countries in the so-called Western democracies, largely, Western democracies would have signed on to this, agreeing with each other that we have an international problem that affects us. Because if a United States citizen could hide money in the Cayman Islands or in offshore banks in the Bahamas and in the Swiss bank and so on, and decides to use that money to finance terrorism somewhere or some illicit purpose, it affects all of us everywhere in the world. And therefore, it is obvious that international cooperation is necessary. We are all affected by it. I'll tell you quickly, I was the one who piloted the anti-terrorism legislation in this house back in 2005 or something like that, out of the Ministry of National Security. And the argument at that time was that we don't need anti-terrorism legislation because Trinidad is a nice, quiet nation state, south of the Caribbean. Nobody don't have any time with us. But then I saw a bombing in Bali, a quiet little state in Indonesia, a city, destroy the entire tourism platform. And when they bombed the World Trade Center in the United States, Trinidadians were affected. And I know if I was up in a plane and the international terrorists pulled it down, they didn't discriminate, they didn't worry was a Trinidadian or American. And if Mr. Barack Obama was on a beach in Tobago and they saw an opportunity to bomb a hotel or bomb him there, they'll kill Tobagonians too. With an understanding of those things, I knew that terrorism was not a United States problem or a British problem, it was an international problem and we are part of it. Similarly, I understand the value of FATCA because it affects all of us in terms of money laundering and the things that that dirty money would do, whether it is guns, whether it is drugs. And I want to submit, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if these hypocrites who walked out, I'm sorry, if the hypocrite behavior we saw today by the walkout of the opposition is to be taken note of. I'll tell you this, Mr. Deputy Speaker. If they were genuinely concerned about the murders the member for Siparius tried to talk to the Speaker about, they would have been here to discuss this. Nobody who is against crime would oppose this. And as a former police officer, I learned to watch people's modus operandi. And I've been watching them since I came to the Parliament 22 years ago. And I have said before and I say again today, I see signs of criminogenic tendencies. Because it is only people with criminogenic tendencies will oppose legislation to bring taxation, to protect taxation, to provide the goods and services we need, and to protect us from terrorism and the drugs and all the dirty things leading to the debts that she pretended, the member for Sipara pretended to be so concerned about. I have another category of debts that I'm concerned about. But I'm concerned. But I'll raise that in a private motion another time. And there we will have all the pro and the pro-life debates. So I am not prepared to tolerate their hypocrisy easily. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the obligations of FATCA, and this is for the benefit of the citizens of this country, so they can understand what they're losing out on here today, is about identification and documentation, classification of all new and existing clients as U.S. taxpayers, non-U.S. taxpayers, or exempt from documentation or reporting. Withholding, you heard the Attorney General say, if you don't comply with this, there'll be a 30% withholding tax. In other words, if Trinidad and Tobago doesn't comply with this, any transaction out of Trinidad and Tobago, and they can shut you down.
Members, he is well able, Honorable AG, he is well able. Proceed, member.
Thank you very much. But I've learned so much from the Attorney General on this matter. He's so passionate about it. I think he deserves to comment. It involves annual reporting requirements on all U.S. persons who are not exempted, recalcitrant accounts, non-participating accounts, certain non-financial foreign entities, and other persons required under FATCA. The recent impact of the weakened bank secrecy on the Swiss banking in 2010. Because these offshore banks used to be very secretive. Since I was a child, I was hearing about people hiding money in Swiss banks. But in May 2009, the Obama administration announced a plan to reform corporate taxation by strictly enforcing laws against tax haven abuse in an effort to raise $8.7 billion in tax revenues. The administration's effort to stop tax haven abuse are necessary to increase tax revenues to decrease the deficit which the US carries constantly, perennially, and fund new programs. President Obama was quoted as saying, "If financial institutions won't cooperate with us, we will assume that they are sheltering money in tax havens and act accordingly." A very insidious comment. He didn't only limit that to US companies or institutions, He was talking about the international scenario. Hence the reason for their aggressiveness to get other countries to participate. And as the Attorney General said, in Europe, the Global Forum is doing the same thing. The same standards that are expected in FATCA are being established and organized in the European context through the Global Forum, all designed to protect us from some of the troubles in the world. And I have a number of examples. For example, in February 2015, a gentleman by the name of George Briquet, B-R-I-Q-U-E-T, pleaded guilty to corruptly endeavoring to obstruct and impede the IRS in the United States. For tax years 2001 to 2010, he filed false income tax returns in which he failed to report his foreign financial accounts and failed to report any income earned thereon and failed to pay any taxes on such foreign income. He was found guilty. In 2014, Martin Lack, a former same Swiss banker from the same bank, the UBS, was sentenced to 5 years and ordered to pay a fine. He was charged in August of 2011 with conspiracy to defraud the United States. He assisted US customers to open and maintain secret accounts. Yet I could tell you this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, which gives support for what I inquired about earlier, as to whether our friends on the other side would know of people who have something to hide. There's a former Minister of Government in the last administration who has no less than about 9 properties. I saw the deeds myself, from Mocha to Federation Park to San Fernando, Philippines, all over the place. Expensive properties. When the media approached him during his time in office and asked him, how did you acquire all of this? He told them it was money from legal fees he had gotten while he was working before.
$1 million a month.
While he was working before, earning them, and they were now flowing in. But I had information that that individual had declared losses on his tax declarations for 3 straight years in the run-up to his assuming office here. I had that information with facts and figures and documents too. And all that time, the member for Siparia as Prime Minister was listening to all of this. And just as she walked out today, she walked out on that. That is why I one day said in other language, they can't correct each other. All of them is the same thing. And that is why I want to compliment the Attorney General. Because while our revenue, our inland revenue, is not as strong as the United States IRS, it has the same function to collect taxes, to deal with the public good and services. So this government, in its last dispensation, the PNM, tried to improve our tax collection regime with a revenue authority. They opposed that too. And I want to congratulate the Attorney General because he stood here a couple of weeks ago and told us that shortly we will get to discuss and debate in this House legislation that requires you to explain your assets. Am I correct, AG?
Yes, sir.
So all who have 9 deeds and 9 properties and could satisfy the member for Siparia as Prime Minister that that was all money coming in, they'll have to explain that to a courthouse and show where did you get the money. And we need to improve our tax regime in Trinidad and Tobago as well. Because our friends on the other side, they complain about crime. They complain about roads, they complain about lights, they complain about water. It takes cash to care, it takes money. And every week we sit in the cabinet, we're seeing their reckless borrowing. And we see nothing in the country to represent. Yesterday in the cabinet, we saw $1.6 billion to TNTech, a loan that they created. But today I'm struggling to find money to continue the illumination program of play parks and public spaces in this country. So all they have done is bring shame and disgrace and disaster to this country and frittered away billions of dollars. 63 billion on average a year for the time they spend there. Run up the public debt and then come here with great hypocrisy to ask for this and they want that and they want the other. And when it's time to improve the tax regime, they're not supporting that. When it's time to protect the economy with factor, they're not supporting that. I told you I have observed criminogenic tendencies. And ad hominem contributions. And not for the first time, I'm putting on record, I sat in this parliament since 1995. And there were many occasions I asked myself, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if the positions my friend took on the other side. Listen, this country doesn't know. When we were in opposition between 95 and 2001, there were 18 pieces of legislation that required constitutional support, and the PNM gave it 18 times. The records are there. They wouldn't support us once, even when they signed this agreement. They find a reason not to support it. We saw 2 weeks ago with the gambling bill, a bill that they presented to this House. The Attorney General brought it back. No, the Minister of Finance. Without changing a dot or a comma, not one change. And they are making up to resist it. And they have said openly, the member for Oropuchis, they will not give us support as though they're doing the PNM alone something. Yes, they are affecting the parliament, but really it is the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is why I quote George Chambers, they are too wicked. They are too wicked. So this business of collecting taxes and tax evasion is a serious thing. The United States have their own issues with collecting their taxes, but it has implications for us, as I've said before, because it is those monies, unrecorded, unseen, if it is allowed to hide, that could do strange things in strange places, including issues of terrorism. The Bloomberg News, one Richard Rubin writing in March of 2015, as far back as that, identified that 8 of the biggest US technology companies added another $65 billion to money stashed away. It is estimated now that there's about $2 trillion in US hidden from the United States government in places all over the country. So you can understand why they want to get access here. So that's the benefit to them. but there are benefits for us as well. Because if we don't support this, we will be affected in the ways I've just explained to you. And worse than that, by failing to comply, and even with the Global Forum, we were reminded a while ago, when we are not compliant, we run serious risks that every citizen in this country will feel. Right now, you go to a bank and you try to get some US currency, there's a problem. The UNC created that. We ran the government for the last year on fumes. The UNC created that. We find ourselves now in these crisis economic situations, still having to borrow money to service this country. The UNC created that. And if, like the airport situation that was supposed to cost 400 million and ended up costing the taxpayers 1.6 billion between 95 and 2000, that led to the Piarco inquiry and charges against some of their friends. We saw how that panned out. And all the billions in the last 5 years, we are still to account for those. Where is that money? And this is designed to unearth it for the United States, for all our partners, even CARICOM. Let me show you that. Let me tell you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. CARICOM has taken a position on this. Let me get the exact statistics here for you. Yes. In 2010, our Caribbean neighbors, with whom we have an international regional agreement called CARICOM, entered into agreement among the governments of the member states of CARICOM for the avoidance of double taxation and the prevention of fiscal evasion, a double taxation agreement, to prevent people from having to pay taxes more than once and that sort of thing. This treaty, however, did not touch and concern or affect the offshore banking sector in the way that this FATCA legislation is designed to do. While provision is made at Article 24 of CARICOM Treaty for a broad exchange of information, it does not provide for the reporting of information as contained in these measures. These measures are far more far-reaching, far more detailed, because it is common sense. Those who are intent on doing damage to us in this world, hiding money, stealing money, laundering money, running drugs, running guns. And I saw this morning, about an hour ago, just before we settled into this sitting here today, a woman was killed in St. James. That's the report. Only yesterday in my own constituency, another young man fell. And everybody gets on top of the Minister of National Security as though he personally pulled the trigger. I find it so stupid. And the records of this parliament would show I, Fitzgerald Hines, have never blamed any government for crime. Because I know.
Honourable Member, your speaking time has expired. You care to avail yourself of the additional 15?
Thank you very much. I propose so to do that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I don't accuse no government. What I have said is that when you have poor leadership and one can't correct the other and there's no morality in public affairs as exists so rampantly in the UNC, their presence in government facilitates crime. But I don't think the member for Siparia or anyone on the UNC kill anybody. So I wouldn't blame the Minister of National Security, John Sandy, or what was his name? Gary Griffith for no murder. What we have to do as a society is pull ourselves together, just like the US is doing here, and do all that we can, use our intellect, put legislation in place, train and equip our people who are paid and sworn to protect us, and give them the best shot at it. Educate our people, create legitimate opportunities for growth. But notwithstanding all of that, human history has shown those who are deliberate to do wrong and to do crime, they will do it. And then you have to have the means to catch them, to detect it, and prosecute them and incarcerate them. And deal with them in accordance with the law. So I want as well to take this opportunity in the face of all the madness taking place out there to remind the national community that we don't manufacture no guns in Trinidad, all come in from near and far. We don't manufacture cocaine in Trinidad, all comes in from near and far, and all the other nasty drugs. So it has to do with securing our borders as an island state, something that we worked on real hard and got to a point where we had 360-degree coverage, and we had ships that can have intercepted swiftly and helicopter capacity, and the UNC broke down that. So today, when we are reaping the rewards of not having secure borders, they complain against the Minister of National Security. Well, I'm too sensible for that. I support and encourage my Minister of National Security and urge him to continue his best and provide leadership to the institutions under his watch. I can't hold him personally responsible for nothing. But I was telling you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, CARICOM appointed a task force led by Jamaica to advise on the best approach for the region. 19 of the 22 states listed have committed to the implementation of FATCA, 19 of 22. And we are supposed to be leaders in the Caribbean. And in fact, in many ways, we are. They are looking to us. So we are trying to comply for our sake in CARICOM and for our sake in Trinidad and Tobago. The opposition knows full well that this bill requires their support, because in some ways it is inconsistent with elements of the Constitution, inconsistent with other aspects of the law. And they know we need their support. And what do? The first occasion they had, they walked out. And today they came here with a stage-managed walkout all again. But I asked the Almighty God to look upon us. And the PNM and the government, we are here doing all that we could do. We present these measures to the Parliament. It was for our friends on the other side to study it. The Attorney General tells you they never submitted in writing their concerns because probably there are none. They are the ones who signed this agreement. What they did is to put a full-page ad. And the best the Attorney General and the government could have done was to take their public statements on it in that ad and address every one of the concerns. And that we have done. How much more could we do? What else could we in this democracy do? The rest is up to the people. And those people who they claim to represent. And even the people who they don't claim to represent. All the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I close, in full and strong condemnation of the UNC and the government, the opposition, as I stand here today in full support of the measures as proposed by the Attorney General in this the FATCA bill, so-called, I too join the Attorney General in calling on the Chaguanas Business Chamber, the Pinal Dibe Business Chamber, the Tunapuna Business Chamber, the Couva Point Lisas Business Chamber, the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Commerce, the South Energy Chamber, and all other organizations who will no doubt be afflicted and affected by the recklessness and the selfishness and the ad hominem posture of those on the other side in not supporting this. And as I posit, probably for reasons we are yet to find out, I want to commend these measures to this House, and I will give it full support when the opportunity presents by way of my vote. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thank you.
I recognize the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, I stand here today with a genuine sense of disappointment, sadness, anger, and disgust. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, who other citizens of Trinidad and Tobago took the time to elect to represent their views in this House, today I hold my head in somewhat of collective shame. Because as I think of how it must be when I go home to face my young children this evening, to tell them that yet again, those who are elected to serve in this House have seen it fit to stage the most transparent walkout we have seen in months. And I put it on record, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that before the member of Siparia staged and facilitated her departure from this chamber, members whom she leads had already picked up their stuff to leave. And that is evidence of a staged walkout on something, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as important as this FATCA legislation. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I put on record here today, and let it be marked in the Hansard for future generations to read, that as we stand here, in exactly 10 minutes' time, the leader of the opposition has called a press conference at the leader of the opposition's office on Charles Street. So rather than sit here today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and do the people's business as we have all come here to do, having spent last night preparing to go through clause by clause in this most important piece of legislation, they have staged a walkout and they have left this chamber. And the 18 constituencies in Trinidad, because Tobago is sensible enough, the 18 constituencies in Trinidad that they were elected to represent, they have failed today. And I ask for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to be sensible, because they are right thinking, and not fall for any fallacy that those on the other side in exactly 9 minutes will attempt to sell to this population. I mark it here again on the Hansard with your leave, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that this bill was first debated in this House on the 9th of September, exactly 3 months ago. And we have, as the government, received not a single proposed amendment from those on the other side. So let all of the NGOs, let all of the right-thinking citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, all of the chambers, the Bankers Association, etc., take note. Because this government on the 9th of September, when it brought this legislation to Parliament, from that day onwards has always held itself available to any citizen to put forward suggested amendments to this legislation. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, today a cloud hangs over us as representatives, and I would like to personally disassociate myself and those who would allow me on this side to speak for them from the type of behavior we've seen here exhibited yet a second time over this piece of legislation. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this legislation, as it stands before us, is really legislation that affects the lives of US taxpayers. And I think that point is being lost. But what it means, because we have already signed the intergovernmental agreement, that one day the US will pass domestic legislation to allow our Board of Inland Revenue to go after those who may hold assets outside of Trinidad and Tobago. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is with a great sense of sadness, disappointment, and disgust that I rise to record this behavior that is far from being exemplary behavior. And one questions how they can call themselves leaders, because as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, they've yet again failed. And let no citizen, no right-thinking citizen of Trinidad and Tobago be fooled, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when they come to say that their voices were muffled or they were not provided with the opportunity to speak and debate. Because on 2 occasions prior to today, that opportunity was opened up.
5th time we're here.
This is the 5th time I'm told by the Attorney General that we're here before this bill. We have been speaking about this for ages. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with that preamble, I would like now to put on record for those citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, including those that the 18 members from Pointe-a-Pierre, Siparia, Naparima, Tabaquite, Chaguanas East, Caroni Central, Oropouche East, and others represent, what it is and how this bill affects us as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. We heard it mentioned, and I think it's worth repeating, that to today's date, the Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago is on record having told the Honorable Attorney General of attempting to meet with the opposition. Because you see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for the citizens looking on, let the point not be lost. This bill requires a special majority as per our Constitution. And from day one, the commitment has been given by a PNM government that you have the 23 votes that we command. We can do no more than give our 23 votes to this special legislation. And this is legislation, as I said, that really affects the rights of the U.S. Treasury and the IRS to recover taxes that are legitimately due and owing to them. We don't have the 18 votes that other citizens of Trinidad and Tobago put into those empty seats here today. And let them answer to the persons we hear them say on a weekly basis they represent what legitimate, reasonable basis they could have had for leaving this chamber here today. They will say that crime is a scourge on our country, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and there is not a single member on this side who would disagree with that. So let the record reflect that this administration and this government is equal as any citizen of Trinidad and Tobago disturbed by the crime and the violent crimes we're seeing being committed, and in particular those crimes that seem to be aimed at the weaker in society, including our many strong female citizens. And we criticize, we detest, and we detach ourselves from those crimes. And I can assure you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that this government is working as hard as it can, along with the law enforcement officers of Trinidad and Tobago, in dealing with this crime scourge. So to come with the most transparent attempt to scuttle a parliamentary debate that they've known about for weeks, under the pretext of crime needed to be dealt with today,
It's on your paper for 4 months.
that crime needed to be dealt with today, is simply unacceptable. And I put it bluntly and squarely, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the right-thinking citizens of Trinidad and Tobago will reject whatever it is going to be said in the next 3 minutes. Surely it will be, oh, they wanted to take crime to Parliament. This bill is dealing with crime. This bill has at the heart of it, Mr. Deputy Speaker, an attempt by one of our ally sovereigns how to deal with white-collar crime, and it includes how to deal with organized crime and every single type of crime, human trafficking, etc. Every single crime is affected by this bill as we help our sovereign neighbor, our sovereign ally, the United States of America. And included in that, and the agreement that was finally signed by this Minister of Finance after being approved by them and them doing nothing about it for years, goes to the heart of the fight against crime. So whatever it is that they intend to say outside of this chamber, where they have a parliamentary constitutional responsibility to be here today to debate this important legislation, I call on every right-thinking citizen of Trinidad and Tobago to reject it outright and to turn their back on those 18 members who, in a staged walkout, have left this hallowed chamber here today. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to get to the bill and all of the substance around the bill, this is domestic legislation that goes to us fulfilling our international obligation to not only the United States, but to other agencies who deal with anti-money laundering and the fight against terrorism, the fight against heinous crimes such as Global Forum and other jurisdictions. This is giving life to our international obligations, including FATCA. If this bill is not made law by a specific point in time, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and it requires the two-thirds majority, and those who have absented themselves from the House today are quite aware of this, so they are holding the citizens to ransom. They're extorting the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Let me tell everyone who's listening, through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of the effects this will have on us as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. If this legislation is not passed by a specific point in time, not only the US Treasury and the IRS, but more importantly, the financial institutions around the world will cancel their corresponding banking arrangements with Trinidad and Tobago, including Republic Bank, Scotiabank, FCB, RBC, JMMB, and all of our financial institutions. They are entitled to cancel their correspondent banking because of the law that exists in the United States that requires them to reach out to their customers all over the world and feed that information back to the US Treasury and to the IRS. So what happens is, as has happened, there's a potential to happen, as has happened in Belize, you lose your corresponding banking status. And in addition to that, every single transaction with one of these foreign banks by any citizen of Trinidad and Tobago will immediately attract a 30% withholding of value to cover that liability. So where we are already under strained circumstances, the 18 members on the other side are putting every citizen of Trinidad and Tobago today, as they did before, into a situation where when you spend $100 US in the United States, be it on Amazon, etc., the government, the corresponding bank, your local bank, FCB, Scotia, RBL, etc., are entitled to withhold $30 US out of that transaction. And that now sits on the back and the shoulders of the 18 absent members of this parliament here today. Of course, it is possible that we don't even reach to that 30% being withheld. And because of the irresponsible, disgusting behavior of those on the other side, what can happen is correspondent banking, as has happened in Belize, gets completely cancelled. And what that then means is our local banks will fail because they will not have the international reach that they currently have. So we want to hear from those on the other side on the context and with the background, Mr. Deputy Speaker, where they have failed to date to provide a single amendment. I repeat that. They have not to date provided a single written amendment to us on this side as to why or what are their difficulties with the current bill before us. They have picked up their bags and their books and left the chamber here this afternoon. I was coming here and planning to speak today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to speak about this type of legislation that affects citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and how we must depoliticize it and how it must not be about those on this side and those on that side and trying to hold each other to ransom. And I'd like to put on the record again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that when there was a PNM opposition prior to September 2015, that PNM opposition supported 92% of the legislation proposed by the then government. We are responsible representatives on this side. Mr. Deputy Speaker, let that point not be lost, because we sat in this, not this house, but the upper house at the Senate, the Attorney General, myself, the leader of government business and others, and we debated for 2 days straight, to 2 a.m. in the morning and onwards, the public procurement legislation. Yes, that's right. And sitting down in committee, we went through each of the hundreds of clauses, and we agreed to amendments, and we negotiated on behalf of, not ourselves, that's right, not on behalf of a UNC government, but on behalf of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. As an opposition, we supported what is sensible and reasonable legislation. That has not happened in a single instance since September 2015. And what we're seeing here now, with a bill that has a mere 30 clauses, 31 pages of bill, and then the IGA attached, is again a complete walkout and failure by those opposite to even sit and discuss what are the difficulties. But what did they do? I would like to remind the population. Through the Parliament, so the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago, on the last occasion, they took out a full-page ad, paid for by the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago, to put forward not proposed amendments, to put forward not concerns, but a political ad saying these are some of the areas that we have difficulties. Let the right-thinking citizens mark today as an important day in history for Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Let the right-thinking citizens of Trinidad and Tobago judge what has gone on in this House today. Let them listen very carefully to what must be taking place in Charles Street at the Leader of the Opposition's office instead of this chamber here today, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And let them say what are the reasons when you've had a bill for the last 3 months, you've proposed not a single amendment to it. They refused to meet with us on the last occasion we were here. The Honorable Minister of Finance, who is piloting this legislation, adjourned to provide over the space of an hour. We went upstairs in a room and we sat down by ourselves for a whole hour, waiting for the opposition to come and discuss with us. We provided them with a marked up version, having worked overnight because the advertisement came out at the stroke of midnight. We read it as a responsible government does. We sat down with the hard-working public servants and technocrats and amended the legislation, not based on any proposed amendments or proposed difficulties by them, based on an ad paid for by the taxpayers. And we came up with some proposals, sent that to them as we left the chamber, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sat down in a room by ourselves for an hour, came back down into the chamber. They did not do the people's business then. They are not doing the people's business today. And I call upon the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to tell them flatly, bluntly, and in the highest possible voice that that is unacceptable for the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago.
Very good. Police and the law.
And I'd like to remind, if I may, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago about the chronology of this legislation, lest they be misled to be told that they were hijacked with this or that they weren't given sufficient opportunity to look at the legislation, to understand the legislation, to debate the legislation. Cabinet, by minute 1470 on the 23rd of May in the year 2013, Mr. Deputy Speaker, a year when those on the other side were leading this country, agreed to, among other things, to adopt the Model 1 option of the IGA. Because you see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is legislation, domestic legislation, that gives life to an international obligation we have signed on with the United States of America. So in 2013, that side agreed as the then government to what type of agreement it would enter into. In October 2013, again, a government led by the member for Siparia agreed to the Model 1A IGA, which is a model to be signed between Trinidad and Tobago and the United States of America. So by October 2013, a UNC-led government had agreed via cabinet, and there's a cabinet minute to reflect it, that they would sign this IGA, 2013 October. Negotiations then ensued between the US Treasury and the government of Trinidad and Tobago on the IGA between late 2013 and the early part of 2014. Then, Attorney General Ram Logan agreed in September 2014 that the Minister of Finance in 2014 could sign a version of the IGA that would have been submitted for vetting. On the 23rd of September 2014, the then Minister of Finance, Larry Hawaii, advised the U.S. Treasury that the Trinidad and Tobago is prepared to enter into a Model 1A IGA. They started with this in May 2013. In September 2014, a whole year before the general election of 2015, the Minister of Finance of Trinidad and Tobago, under Kamala Persad-Bissessar-led administration, said that they were prepared to sign the IJ. The U.S. Treasury then wrote back with some comments and requested feedback on some of the positions of Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago, rather than sign the IJ, initialed it in November 2014 to allow us to be placed on an agreement in substance list. The U.S. Treasury then required a further response from Trinidad and Tobago in November 2014 to allow us not to be blacklisted. Mr. Deputy Speaker, without any fear of contradiction, up to September 2015, when an IJ had been agreed between this government and the government of the United States, the government led by the member for Siparia failed to sign the agreement that had been vetted by the Attorney General and had been advised that they could go ahead and sign, thereby putting Trinidad and Tobago, as at September 2016, into a very unsatisfactory position where the U.S. Treasury was warning us that we could find ourselves blacklisted. We came into government. So on August 7, 2015, a month before we came into government, when the Attorney General then was telling the Minister of Finance then to go ahead and sign the IJ, they failed to. But as we now know, historically, and I put on record again, we know what they were doing between August 7th, 2015 and September 7th, 2014. On September 4th, 2015, they signed an agreement called Contract Addendum Number 2 in an agreement with OAS where they washed away this country's ability to cancel a contract on the basis of bankruptcy. We have seen a number of financing agreements signed in the week before elections, putting a debt burden on this country that will take years for us to climb out of, for them to pay contractors hundreds of millions of dollars up to the day of elections on the 7th of September. We've heard examples in this chamber and in the other house of on the night of the 6th of September into the morning of the 7th of September 2015, lands in Chagaramas being signed away, but they could not sign the IGA that they'd been advised to by their Attorney General to sign, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The Attorney General is reminding us about Global Forum. Global Forum will be spoken about in weeks to come and months to come, where they completely ignored the warnings from 14 plus other sovereign states that if they don't sign similar arrangements as was signed by this Minister of Finance in August of this year, it would put us again into great difficulty and at risk of being shut down, at the risk of being no more correspondent banking, etc., Mr. Deputy Speaker. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with that chronology in mind and understanding that those 18 members on the other side, some of whom may not have been in the government at the time, but being led by the same person, failed to do what was right for Trinidad and Tobago from October 2013 all the way to September 7th, 2015. It is not at all surprising here today that they've done what they've done and staged a walkout to once again run, Mr. Deputy Speaker, from the international obligations. And I was speaking, I'd like to put on record, Mr. Deputy Speaker, today is International Anti-Corruption Day. So how fitting that those on the other side, where we have a bill that goes to the heart of the fight of corruption, have packed their bags and left the chamber. I put on record here, for those citizens who will pay attention and listen today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that with bills such as this, follow your money bills, explain your wealth legislation, the Revenue Authority legislation, the only reason a person would avoid supporting that can be, the only logical reason is that you have something to hide. And this government is committed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as long as we have life, to follow those transactions to wherever it may lead, Liechtenstein, Holland, United States, Switzerland, the Bahamas, Cayman, any single jurisdiction in the world to bring back that money for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And again, I use this opportunity to put citizens on notice that when we bring the legislation, because the AG has drafted it, when we bring that legislation to this House, explain your wealth, follow the money, legislation for a revenue authority. A revenue authority is a body proposed to make it more efficient to collect taxes that are due to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Let every citizen of Trinidad and Tobago look at this chamber and see who opposes the passage of that type of legislation. And when they oppose the passage of that type of legislation, let the citizens call upon them to explain why, what possible, reasonable circumstance and excuse could they have for not supporting that legislation. And similarly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the legislation that is before us here today.
I got it. Communicating with both.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to take the opportunity to do something I don't believe the speakers who have gone before me have done for the benefit of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago at this stage. And that is to go into very briefly the schedules of the IGA that has been signed for citizens to get an understanding, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of what it is that is before this House, especially in light of the fact that there are others, including others on the other side, who are hell-bent on trying to mislead the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So what was signed by this government in the most responsible fashion in August of this year is an agreement between the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and the government of the United States of America for the exchange of information with respect to taxes. And if you look at Article 1, Mr. Deputy Speaker, which goes to the heart of the object and scope of the agreement, it says, the contracting states shall assist each other to assure the accurate assessment and collection of taxes, to prevent fiscal fraud and evasion. So this is to prevent fiscal fraud and evasion and to develop an improved information source for tax matters. Let those 18 who have deserted the chamber here today explain to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago why they don't want to prevent fiscal fraud and tax evasion. What possible reason, Mr. Deputy Speaker, could those 18 on the other side give for wanting to avoid legislation aimed to go to the heart of tax evasion? If you look at Article 2, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you will see exactly what are the taxes that this goes to the heart of. In the case of the United States of America, it is to deal with federal income taxes, federal taxes on self-employment income, federal taxes on transfers to avoid income tax, federal estate and gift taxes, and federal excise taxes. So all taxes at the federal level, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is not dealing with the collection of taxes or the sharing of information with respect to what you would call the state taxes. It's all at a federal level. And for Trinidad and Tobago, it is envisaged through the signing of this agreement that our Board of Inland Revenue would be able to get information from the IRS and the U.S. Treasury on, and maybe, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is why there was a vacation, an exit, a hasty retreat from this chamber this evening. Let me tell the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago what this is envisaged to give power to the BIR to go after. The United States government would provide, in the case of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, to our Board of Inland Revenue, information with respect to our citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, with respect to income tax, corporation tax, petroleum profits tax, and unemployment levy. So is it that there is a fear that persons may not have paid the income tax or the corporation tax that they were supposed to, and that the Board of Inland Revenue would get this information about money outside of Trinidad and Tobago being housed in the United States? The agreement goes on, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to talk about the competent authority. We heard a lot of noise from the member for Sipario on one occasion and then the member for Chaguanas West on another, complaining about competent authority. Now remember, with the greatest of respect, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what I'm reading from is something that was agreed to by them in 2013 and 2014 that we inherited and signed. So they cannot complain that we have abused anything or done something. They can't complain now because by cabinet notes and minutes, they agreed to this. They agreed that competent authority would mean, in the case of the United States of America, the Secretary of the Treasury or his delegate. That's right. And in the case of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the minister to whom responsibility for finance is assigned or his authorized representative.
Member, your speaking time has expired. You are entitled to 15 minutes. You care to avail yourself?
Yes, please, Mr. Deputy
Proceed.
Speaker. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we've heard from the member for Sipario when they decided to be here to represent those whom elected them and the member for Chaguanas West. They had a problem with reference in the legislation to the minister. I want the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to understand here today that in 2013, 2014, the member for Sipario led a government, including the vast majority of those who have vacated the chamber, and agreed at cabinet level, and due to the positive vetting of the then Attorney General, Anand Ramlogan, that the competent authority for Trinidad and Tobago should be the Minister of Finance or his designate. And they come here and they try to mislead the population. They take out a full-page ad that we, the citizens and the taxpayers, paid for to say that they don't agree to the minister. So at the time when they were sitting at the cabinet table, frolicking, wondering how they could all fit there, if they used to have cabinet, if who used to attend, and subject to the positive vetting of an Attorney General who now sees it fit to utilize legislation that he brought here, and he passed, and he proclaimed knowing we wouldn't be ready for him to profit from. They have the audacity to tell the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and our children that they have a problem with it being the Minister of Finance. When they agreed to it, the records reflect they agreed to that. They, led by Sipario, the Honorable Member for Sipario, are the ones who obligated this country, not this PNM government, but every citizen of Trinidad and Tobago know today that they on the other side are the ones who agreed with the United States that the competent authority under this legislation should be the minister. So if they ever come here to do the people's business responsibly, listen and hear if they complain about it being the minister. And let every citizen outside there remind them, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that they are the ones who agreed with the United States that the competent authority should be the minister. This agreement is about the exchange of information, and I wouldn't get into that. But again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what they agreed to when they were the government leading this country in those 5 dark, rainy, stormy years of our history, Article 7 says implementation. They agreed to this. And let me read, Mr. Deputy Speaker, through you into the Hansard, what it says. A contracting state shall enact such legislation as may be necessary to effectuate this agreement. That could not be in any clearer language. That could not, yes, it is my anger. It could not be, I was going to use some language. It is not easy to accept and sit here. And I say again, as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, as someone who has been given the privilege to represent fellow citizens and to listen to the lies, the misrepresentation coming from others. They knew when as a cabinet in 2013 and 2014 they approved the IGA agreement to be executed by the government, what it meant, who it would affect, and how it should be effectuated. And as I've just read that clause about effectuation, they knew legislation had to come. And I put it to them that when we came into office, We met already drafted legislation. So again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, let those on the other side who have run from the chamber for the second time during the course of the debate of legislation that is going to affect every citizen of Trinidad and Tobago who has a correspondent banking arrangement. So from the time you use a credit card, you shop online, you have any banking arrangement with any bank, because once these banks in Trinidad lose their status as correspondent banks, our economy is going to be affected. And this is not, they will talk about how we speak about doomsday, and we speak to put fear into the citizens' hands and minds. That is absolutely untrue. 41 persons were elected on September 7th to represent every single citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. And we on this side take that responsibility very seriously. We have had members who are sick and they turn up here to do the people's business. We have had members who have had to travel and they put that off to be here to do the people's business. We have had members who have done all that they can to ensure that they're here in this house to do the people's business and to deal with important legislation such as this and others. And we have never behaved in the manner that we've seen behaved on by those on the other side, not once, but twice in the same debate on the same piece of legislation. And I put it here again for those listening, that before the member for Separia jumped up to protest, knowing that there would be a consequence of the manner within which he protests. Citizens listening, when the speaker or the deputy speaker is on her or his legs, every member, all 41 of us know, take your seat. To stand up and engage in debate, and to stand up and engage in cross-talk with a speaker or deputy speaker on her or his feet is only going to lead to one thing. So don't try to fool the population here today. You came here intending to be put out or to march out. I looked at each and every one of them here today and saw that they had already had their bags in their hands before the member for Separia took on the speaker. And don't let them hide under the banner of wanting to bring urgent business about crime. Crime is urgent and at the forefront of our mind. We are not denying that. But that is a continuing conversation. Does it cross the hurdle of importance to be put on the order paper for today? That was deemed, and there's one person in this house who has the power to exercise the discretion to decide that. And once again, they on the other side have shown complete disrespect, disregard for the rules and for what the Constitution says and for the standing orders, and again for authority. We do not behave like that in this house. And today, the 20-odd members on this side would like to put on the record that we are very, very disappointed in the behavior by those on the other side, and we distance ourselves from it. And I warn the citizens, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I wind up, I warn the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and especially those looking on, that this will not be the last time that they do it. Because there are a number of pieces of legislation, and I'm beginning to wonder, and I'm wondering out aloud now, that seems to have persons in this house nervous. It always has to do with following the money. It always has to do with a fight against corruption. It always has to do with explain your wealth.
Please.
Sorry. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I wind up here today, I'd like to use this opportunity to bring some more to put a positive end to it. On behalf of those on this side, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to thank the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago for going through yet another peaceful, well-done local government election 2 Mondays ago. Because as a democracy, we should take pride as citizens in the fact that our elections to date have been peaceful elections and that we carry out ourselves with a great sense of responsibility. So as a member of Parliament for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, I thank the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who took the time to participate in the local government election. I thank the EBC for the usual efficiency within which they carried out their job, even though they were under attack from others. And most importantly, I take the opportunity to thank Port of Spain North for returning, Port of Spain North in the local government election, for returning all of the electoral districts to a PNM government. And without fear of contradiction, with a Port of Spain City Corporation that is only PNM aldermen, only PNM councillors, I can say that they will represent every creed and race who shall find an equal place in Port of Spain and environs. Because we on this side operate in that manner. We on this side represent, and today we represent the 18 constituencies they fail to represent. And we do so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with a great sense of responsibility and pride. So with those few words, I thank you for the opportunity to have contributed to this important piece of legislation.
I recognize the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Excellent.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think before I get into the meat of my winding up, it is necessary to put on the record the chronology of exactly what has occurred with respect to this legislation and this tax information agreement. The U.S. Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, Mr. Deputy Speaker, from where we get the acronym FATCA, was enacted by the U.S. Congress just before the general election of May 2010. The new government came in, and between 2010 May and February 2013, the records indicate that not much, if anything, was done by the former administration to address the requirements of the U.S. Foreign Tax Accounts Compliance Act. Now, this act requires countries such as Trinidad and Tobago to report to the U.S. Treasury on financial and taxation activities of U.S. citizens, whether they are individuals or corporations, U.S. persons who operate in Trinidad and Tobago. In 2013, CARICOM established a regional task force under the chairmanship of Jamaica to study the U.S. FATCA legislation and to review national legislation among member states of CARICOM, obviously to determine what was needed to be done to bring domestic legislation within CARICOM into compliance with the U.S. Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. At that CARICOM meeting, Trinidad and Tobago was represented by the former Prime Minister, Kamla Persad Bissessa. So it is not to say that the former Prime Minister or the former government are unaware of the requirements of FATCA. In May 2013, which would have been 2 months after the 3 months actually after the CARICOM meeting at which Ms. Bissessa was present, the former government, by Cabinet Minute number 1470 of May 23, 2013, agreed to sign the Model 1A Intergovernmental Agreement with the United States of America to enable compliance with the requirements of the U.S. Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. And the Cabinet of the day, headed by Ms. Bissessa, agreed that they would sign the agreement with the United States to bring Trinidad and Tobago into compliance with FATCA by December 31st, 2013. In October 2013, consistent with the Cabinet decision of May 2013, Cabinet Minute number 3035 of October 31st, 2013, agreed that the Board of Inland Revenue, in its capacity as the competent authority for Trinidad and Tobago, consider either a reciprocal or non-reciprocal option with respect to the IGA, and eventually agreed and proposed that Trinidad and Tobago enter into the reciprocal IGA with the United States. And just let me stop here, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The agreement that I signed on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago is, in fact, the identical reciprocal intergovernmental agreement with the United States that the Cabinet of Ms. Bissessa agreed to sign by December 31st, 2013. We have not changed a full stop, a comma, or a semicolon. So what I did was simply do what they should have done by December 31st, 2013, on which they had agreed to do. Notwithstanding the fact that the Cabinet had agreed to sign the agreement before December 31st, 2013, 2013 came and went without this signing of the agreement by the former government. In December 2014, 1 year later, the former Minister of Finance, Mr. Hawaii, indicated to the United States an intention to sign the Model 1A IGA, the reciprocal IGA. So, February 2013, CARICOM establishes a task force. The former Prime Minister is present in order to deal with FATCA compliance. May 2013, the former government agreed to sign the Model 1A intergovernmental agreement by December 31st, 2013. October 31st, Cabinet agreed the Board of Inland Revenue would act as the competent authority. December 2014, a year later, the former Minister of Finance signed an intention to enter into the Model 1A intergovernmental agreement. Now, I don't understand what the problem was. Yes. Why agree to sign it, and then a whole year later, sign an intention to sign it? It seems to me that they were delaying, procrastinating, prevaricating, and simply avoiding signing the intergovernmental agreement, even though they knew that it had to be signed, and even though their cabinet had agreed to sign it. Fast forward now to September 7, 2015, the government changed, and in September 2015, just 1 week after the government changed, I, in my capacity as Minister of Finance, was advised that there was a deadline for FATCA compliance of September the 30th, 2015, based on the intention to sign the agreement signed by the former Minister of Finance, Mr. Hawaii, in December 2014. So by signing that intention, Mr. Hawaii then initiated a process which created a deadline for Trinidad and Tobago of September 30th, 2015. Well, we went right up to September 7th, and they didn't sign the agreement. I came in, I was given the portfolio and discovered this, and of course, it was impossible for us to meet the requirements within a 2-week period. So I wrote to the Treasury in the United States and asked for an extension for obvious reasons, that we're a new government, we had just come in, we had discovered that the former government had not done what they had promised to do, and we got a 1-year extension. In August of 2016, on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, I signed the very same intergovernmental agreement, tax information sharing agreement, with the United States that the UNC government had agreed to sign since 2013. And that initiated the process leading to legislation. On the 29th of August, the LRC, the Legislative Affairs Committee or Legislative Review Committee of the Cabinet, looked at the bill. On the 30th of August, the following day, the government and the opposition met to have discussions whereby the opposition indicated its intention to support the FATCA legislation. After that, the bill came to the House with the full expectation that there would be support from the other side because, of course, they agreed to sign it. They signed an intention to sign it. So we just assumed, I think it was quite reasonable of us to assume they, having signed everything and agreed to everything, that they would support the legislation. So the bill came into the House on the 9th of September, piloted by yours truly. The opposition then, in what has unfortunately become typical behavior for them, indicated they would not support the bill without amendments. Now, when they declared their intention to the United States in December 2014 to, yeah, it's all right, don't worry. When they declared their intention in December 2014 to the United States to sign the agreement, they didn't have any amendments. But now they're worried about invasion of privacy, intrusive powers, draconian powers being given to the Minister of Finance, the overreaching role of the minister, constitutional rights, and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on. Of course, the very said agreement that they agreed to sign and signed an intention to sign bound us to do all of this. Then, so that's September 9th. September 10th, the leader of the opposition made a number of statements saying that the Minister of Finance will have access to private information, she would not allow it, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So, we decided as a responsible government, we would not try to, rush through this thing. And on September 12th, we met, and a decision was taken to see if the bill can go to a joint select committee. And as Minister of Finance, I sought an extension of time from the US Treasury. The debate in the bill then continued on the 14th, and the opposition started to raise all sorts of arguments again, that the minister could give directions to persons, it's overreaching, that who's going to monitor the process of disclosure of information, it will allow the release of sensitive information, what is the individual's recourse to a fair hearing, and so on, and so on, and so on. And the leader of the opposition again complained that this thing will cause an invasion of privacy, and so on, and so on, and so on. In the interim, recognizing that the opposition was not going to support the legislation, was reneging on its commitment given to the United States. You have to understand, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is a sovereign country, Trinidad and Tobago, sovereign government, making a binding commitment to the United States of America when the former Minister of Finance, Larry Hawaii, signed the intention to enter into the agreement and
with cabinet approval?
With cabinet approval, and communicated that to the United States Treasury.
Twice in
they have decided that something wrong with the agreement, they don't like it, it's an invasion of privacy, and they don't want to sign it, and it must go to a joint select committee, and so on, it must have public consultation, cote ci, cote la. So, recognizing that they were reneging on the assurances given by this country to the United States, I wrote to the US Treasury and asked for an extension of time. I complied with the FATCA requirements that in order to receive this extension of time, you need to have a plan. You need to show the US Treasury that you have a timetable and a plan and a strategy towards becoming FATCA compliant. And we gave the United States a number of dates we indicated that it was our hope and expectation that we could pass the legislation by the end of February 2017. And then between February 2017 and the 30th of September 2017, all of the administrative arrangements would be in place, all of the guidelines, all of the systems, all of the procedures would be in place to allow reporting by the deadline, the new deadline of September 30th, 2017. And because Trinidad and Tobago has indicated its commitment, this government, to the legislation by tabling it in the Parliament and being very serious and sober about it, and because we demonstrated a feasible plan, we were given an extension to the 30th of September 2017. I dare say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I don't think we'll get another extension. So that we hope that the opposition will stop grandstanding and stop gallerying and stop playing the fool with a very serious matter. It is highly unfortunate that they walked out today in what was obviously a stage-managed walkout. I mean, if they try to say otherwise, they're not fooling anybody. I wanted to hear, we, the government, wanted to hear what their proposed amendments were. We have tried our best based on the newspaper advertisement and the vague utterances they have made in the newspapers to fashion amendments that capture their complaints, but we don't know because all we hear is that they come in with amendments. But as you can see from this chronology I've given you, we've been at this since September. Since the 9th or 10th of September, we've been in this place trying to squeeze out of them what are your required amendments. Please submit them to the Parliament so that we can look at them and we'll try to accommodate them as best as we can. But for the last 3 months, all we're getting from them is old talk. So I certainly hope that as we go into the committee stage, I certainly hope as we go into the committee stage that, no problem. I certainly hope as we go into the committee stage, or before we go into the committee stage, that we'll get something out of them. Because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is ridiculous for something as serious as this, where we're going to lose all our correspondent banking and our financial relationships with the rest of the world, that the opposition is just there carrying on and they won't give us written amendments. And I call upon the opposition, stop playing the fool and give us written amendments.
This is too serious.
I'm not finished.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very kindly, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this House to now adjourn to Monday, the 12th day of December at 1:30 p.m. at I'm aware. At which time we will continue the winding up of this matter and we will continue the FATCA debate. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Honorable members, the question is that this House do now adjourn to Monday, 12 December 2016 at 1:30 p.m. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned to Monday, the 12th December 2016 at 1:30 p.m.